Good day to all you beautiful people. I hope you're all doing great. So today we're going to talk about drafting. This is a video I've been wanting to make for a very long time. Actually, the last compendium is just kept getting pushed forward and forward. The background, I didn't know what to put as the background for drafting, so I just put on the best drafters out there in the pro scene right now, in my opinion, and that's what it is. So why do we care about drafting? Well, Battle Cup. Straightforward Battle Cup. Nobody plays Captain Mode, and whoever plays Captain Mode, I don't know who you are. But it's Battle Cup, and it is extremely important. You get a good draft in Battle Cup. Essentially, the lower in MMR you are, the more important it is to get the right draft. Because with a bad draft, you will almost certainly lose. However, with a higher MMR, to be honest, it's not really fair because the higher in MMR you go, the chances of bad drafts and the amount of badness of the draft decreases. So, point being, it's more important to get a good draft the lower in MMR you are. And if you have a bad draft straight away, the chances of your winning severely decline. You're playing with a 40% disadvantage, 40% more disadvantage, or more than that, obviously, depending on how bad your draft is. Okay, so let's just jump into it. This is the very familiar drafting screen. Now, at this moment, I would like to point out what the terminology is. Most of you already know this, but just to be safe, just to be clear for this video, we're going to point it out just so everybody's on the same page. All right, so this is the first ban stage. Doesn't matter which team you are on. This is the first pick phase, second ban phase, second pick phase, third ban phase, and third pick phase. So when I say the third pick of the second pick phase, this is what I'm talking about. And for ease and simplicity, I might actually just say the 15th selection. 15 is numbers right there. It's so easy. So just so we don't get confused. Okay, so there's two types of teams, and your drafting depends very strongly on which of the two types of teams yours is. There's long-standing teams, people who practice a lot together, they've been together for a long time, and then there's random teams, you just a bunch of friends that you just play with just for Battle Cup. Now, the reason this is important is purely because of communication. Now, when it comes to long-standing teams, you know each other's voices, you know how to communicate, you've ironed out the communication issues, and now you're able to play better team fights. That means you're picking. Your drafting can be more team fight centric, can have wombo combos, can have hard to execute lineups, or rather harder to execute lineups. I'm never a fan of hard to execute lineups, even if it's long-standing teams, but you have the possibility of that. However, when you've got a fresh team, never ever go for wombo combos or hard to execute lineups. The second thing about long-standing teams is you know what your teammates' hero pools are. You know what heroes they play and what heroes they're good at. Whereas with random teams, you have no idea about that. So it's really, really important that you ask your teammates before the game starts, before the drafting stage comes, you ask your teammates what their 3 or 4 most common heroes are, and you mark them down. I cannot stress how important this is, so that you know if you want to pick a support, even before that, you know what kind of a draft you're going into, depending on what general heroes that your teammates are fond of playing, and what heroes your team struggles against. This is going to be important in the next step when we're talking about the bans. Alright, so let's talk about the first banning phase now. So in the first banning phase, you want to get rid of the most OP heroes. The heroes that are really popular right now, being played in all the pro matches. Now, if you don't know which heroes are being played in the pro matches, shame on you. That's something you should know going into drafting. Building on doing homework before doing the actual drafting, just make sure you have a few 3 or 4 heroes that you want to ban, like preference, first preference, second preference, third preference, just preparation. It's always handy. Don't waste time when it's actually banning. I've seen so many times people are actually going into the overtime when when you're doing the first banning. So why? The second thing that you want to ban is heroes who your team or the team that you're planning on picking is generally going to struggle against. Let's say you plan on picking a lot of illusion heroes. Maybe think about banning heroes that are good against illusions like Timbersaw and whatever. And the third thing you want to do, and this is only if you've got a long-standing team, is ban heroes that historically your team struggles against. Let's, for instance, one of my teams, we really struggled against Ursa. So we pretty much always banned Ursa in the first banning phase. One thing to note here is if your team has the first pick of the first pick phase, you might not want to ban all the OP heroes because, well, when you say all, there's only two bans, but you might not want to put both the bans on those meta heroes because you got the first pick, so you can snag that one up for yourself. But just be wary, obviously, that's going to be the first thing on the board, so enemy team is going to have a very long time to stare at that and think about the counter. But again, it's a strong pick, so just go for it. It's always good to pick up those meta heroes. A very common mistake bad drafters make is that they start banning things which are indicative of what they're planning on picking in the future. This is not the time to reveal your hand. The first ban stage, literally, you don't want to tell the enemy anything of what you're planning on doing. Just ban it. Your ban should look like, wow, these are OP heroes or these are just random heroes. And they have no strong counters. Like, don't ban Bloodseeker if you're planning on picking Anti-Mage because that's giving away. You ban something like Bloodseeker, that's giving away that you're planning on picking something like an Anti-Mage or a Slark or something like that. So this is not the time to be showing your hand. So we talked about bans, and first phase bans should be the smoothest, the quickest thing you go through because you've already got it pre-planned what you're going to ban, right? It's not going to change very much. You should not waste much time thinking about the first phase bans. Now, the first phase picks, the first pick of the first phase picks goes very, very similarly. You should not spend much time thinking about the first pick of the first phase because it's going to be, again, something that you've already thought about. The only time you're going to spend is thinking about the second and third pick if the first pick of the enemy is slightly different to what you imagined it would be. Alright, so we talked about the speed of the picks and why it's important. Now, what should you be picking in the first phase picks? Well, first phase picks breaks down into two parts. Team 1 is going to have the first pick and the fourth pick. Team 2 is going to have consecutive second and third pick. And what you pick depends very, very, very strongly on which of the two sides you're on. So we'll first talk about the first pick of the first phase picks. So for the very, very first pick of the game, as we talked about in the banning phase, you're banning the OP heroes. This is the time to snag up that one OP hero that got past the banning stage. So what you can do in the first pick is pick one of those OP heroes, one of those meta heroes that mostly not going to have any counters. Examples of that are Lena, Magnus, Darkseer, Monkey King, Juggernaut, Visage. These guys are very sort of strong meta heroes. I mean, these might change later on if you're watching this a year from when it was made, but these guys are don't really have very strong counters. Most important thing is they don't give anything away about your lane. You pick a Juggernaut, nobody has any idea what you're planning on doing. You could be going for a pushing lineup, fighting lineup, whatever. I have no idea. The enemy can't just pick a counter to it. Similar thing for all the other heroes that I mentioned. A word of advice here, don't pick an OP hero that has a counter, that has a strong counter. Like Ricky might be an OP hero right now, has many, many counters. Try not to pick Ricky in the first pick. Alright, the second option that you have, and this is my favorite option, this is what I mostly do when I'm drafting, is to pick an extremely versatile hero. And a versatile hero, examples of those are Vengeful Spirit, can go mid, can go carry. This is very, very strong support. Doesn't give anything away about your draft or what you're planning on doing or what you're planning on doing with your lanes. Similar thing with Juggernaut, Lena, Axe, Sand King, Wraith King, Elsie, Mirana. All these heroes, they're very versatile in that they don't give anything about your lanes, what you're planning on doing in the game. If you're planning on going for an early game, late game, is you're planning on going for a control lineup, Roche lineup, what sort of a thing you're trying to doesn't give anything away. Versatile picks. Ogre, actually, I forgot about Ogre. Ogre is a very, very, very fantastic first pick because it doesn't give anything away at all. And it's a strong stun support, doesn't give anything away. Really, really strong first pick. Now, another thing you can do is just pick a super, super strong support. And this is something that is very, very common in the pro scene, in the high level pro scene. They pick really, really strong supports as a first pick. Usually those supports are really versatile supports who actually don't have super hard counters. As supports aren't really going to have hard counters. So it's a really safe pick to just pick really, really strong supports. Heroes like Crystal Maiden, Disruptor, Ogre, Warlock, Trien, these are all supports who are very strong and you can very, very safely pick them as a first pick if you really don't know what you should be doing. Actually, I want to add Kotl to this as well. I really like picking Kotl as a first pick. Does give a little bit away, but it's fine, makes the enemy sweat a little bit, so it's completely fine. Alright, and the last thing that you can do, and this is something I would not recommend at all, is to debate a Naga or Alch first pick. Make the enemies think that you're actually going for a Naga draft or an Alchemist draft, but in fact that's actually a Naga support, Alch support, which you're gonna only reveal at the very end, and the enemy just drafted everything to against Naga Alch, and they've just been debated and their draft is suddenly all in the air. Not really recommended at all, but it's something that you should keep in mind in case it's something that you see against you. So just be prepared for this. Alright, so this was all for the very, very first pick. So when it comes to the second and third pick, or as I like to call it, the consecutive picks, it's pretty straightforward. You have one of two options. First option is you go for a reactionary pick. What that means is you see an enemy pick an OP hero, let's say Ricky or something, and you maybe expected that, and you just pick something in reaction to it, let's say Bounty Hunter or Slardar or whatever. So this is purely going to be a reactionary pick, and then your second pick is going to be the same rules that you followed for the first pick of the first phase, like a versatile hero or strong support or something like that. Because in effect, that is exactly what it is, because your first pick is actually a reaction to the enemy first pick. And then you're starting from scratch, essentially. And your second option, and this is the most common option to be honest, is to pick a very, very sweet combo. Sweet combo like Mirana SD, Bane Kunkka, Line SD, or Line Dazzle, or Line Vengeful Spirit, or Treant and Phoenix, or Magnus and Treant, Magnus and Phoenix, whatever. You'll notice this is what the pro drafters do mostly. And this is going to be my highest recommendation to you guys as well. Plan it before the game, what combos, what nice sweet combos you guys want to play, what you guys can run, and then based off the enemy first pick, go for one of those combos. A few words of caution here. Make sure that your second and third pick, the combo pick, is really, really quick. You'll notice this is 99% of the times in the pro scene. You'll notice these two picks, the consecutive picks, are always extremely fast. They do it immediately. And it makes sense because you don't want one pick right there sitting there giving your enemy time to think about what you're going to pick next and think about what they want to do, how they want to react to it. Lastly, in the combo pick, try not to pick two supports as combos. When you pick two supports as combos, you give away what your safe lane is going to be like, exactly what your safe lane is going to be like. The enemy team can then decide about what they want as the offlaner, how hard their offlaner's lane is going to be. You can't react to anything as supports. Like, you normally want to counter an enemy core with one of your supports picks. So normally you want to leave a support for much later on into the draft. And in the off chance that you do want to pick two supports in your combo pick, try to make sure at least one of those supports is a healer, is a defensive support at the very least, even if you're not a healer. Because the thing is, like, if you don't have a defensive support in the two supports that you have, you're forcing your offlaner to be a mech carrier pick. So basically, you're limiting your offlane heroes a huge amount. That's not really a situation that you want to be in, to be honest. Alright, so the last pick, or rather the fourth pick here, is pretty damn simple. It's mostly a gap filler, to be honest. It's either going to be a counter to the enemy double pick. For example, if you see a double pick that you really, really don't like, for example, I don't know, if it's a Wisp and something, you can pick a Disruptor right here. Or you can go for a combo with your first pick, so that you can also have a nice sweet combo in the first phase. Also, this could be something that you know guaranteed the enemy is going to ban based off of what your first pick was. But 99% of the time, it's either going to be a nice combo with your first pick or just going to be a really, really strong support. Because again, this is the first phase picks. You don't want to be giving away your lanes or what you're planning on doing. Alright, fellas, so this concludes the first part. I will definitely be uploading the second part within this week. Hopefully, I'll have all three parts before the next Battle Cup. So stay tuned and leave your comments in the sections down below, whatever. Bye bye.